On Monday, one of the most significant meetings between Turkey and the United States took place in Brussels on the sidelines of the NATO summit. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan met with US President Joe Biden for the first time since his election as US President. Very much related to the concept of reviving diplomacy, the meeting was also significant in understanding whether Biden is really trying to establish better relations with US allies, as he promised during his election campaign. Both leaders discussed many different topics in their meeting, which lasted for about 45 minutes. While both countries believe that this meeting will be the start of a new era in Turkish-US ties. But is it safe to say that the Erdoğan-Biden meeting is also a key indicator for US foreign policy and US allies' future relations with the country? President Erdoğan said that Turkey is the only NATO member actively fighting terrorist organizations like Daesh at the NATO summit. He reminded us that international security and cooperation are extremely important in today's world because of the strength of NATO. Is that the member countries have always been able to unite around a core task: to defend each other, protect each other, and keep people safe with the founding principles, all for one and one for all.
No one knows what happens next, what the future holds.
Which events will shape us?
And which will test our resolve.
Times have changed, you see.
People too.
We need to stick together if we're going to make it through. Sticking together means an alliance of minds and hearts, a collection of individuals greater than the sum of its parts.
People of all different kinds, with different sets of skills that come together and align. Because freedom is what matters.
It is why we must stand tall, and it's why we always tell them,
all for one and one for all.
Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan met with several world leaders on the sidelines of the NATO meeting in Brussels on Monday, calling for a constructive relationship based on mutual understanding, transparency and cooperation among NATO members. Our following infographic gives an overview of Erdoğan's most important statements. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan discussed bilateral relations between Turkey and the United States with his American counterpart, Joe Biden, on the sidelines of this week's NATO meetings in Brussels. The fight against terrorism, the procurement of military equipment dominated the two leaders' agenda.
On the sidelines of this year's NATO summit in Brussels on Monday, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan and his American counterpart Joe Biden held their first bilateral meeting. Erdogan and Biden discussed all aspects of bilateral political, economic and military relations between Turkey and the United States. The Turkish and American leaders also exchanged views on regional and global security challenges during their meeting at the NATO headquarters.
İki müttefike ve stratejik ortağa yakışır şekilde doğrudan diyalog kanallarını etkin ve düzenli şekilde kullanma hususunda mutabık kaldık. Ülkelerimiz arasında mevcut ikili işbirliği ve bölgesel istişare mekanizmalarının yeniden canlandırılması gerektiğinin altını çizdik.
Our two countries have big agendas. Our teams are going to continue our discussions, and I'm confident we'll make real progress with Turkey and the United States.
Regional issues in the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, and the Caucasus region also featured, as well as the fight against terrorism, Russia's S-400 air and missile defense systems, and F-35 stealth fighter jets dominated Erdogan and Biden's meeting. Turkey and the US have extensive relations at every level on bilateral, regional, and global issues. The two allies, however, have been at loggerheads over several issues. Ankara and Washington disagree on a range of issues, from the fight against terrorist organizations to international geopolitical developments.
Türkiye, Amerika Birleşik Devletleri ilişkilerinde çözülemeyecek hiçbir mesele olmadığını, tam tersine işbirliği alanlarımızın sorun başlıklarından daha geniş ve zengin bir görünüm sergilediğini düşünüyoruz.
Turkey is terming the claims by the United States that the S-400 systems pose a threat to F-35 stealth fighter jets as completely incorrect. Turkey has already fulfilled its commitments and responsibilities both on the issue of the S-400 air defense system and the F-35 fighter jets.
Her alanda karşılıklı saygı ve çıkara dayalı verimli bir işbirliği döneminin başlaması noktasında güçlü bir iradenin olduğunu görüyoruz. Sayın Biden'la önümüzdeki dönemde bu hedefler doğrultusunda işbirliğimizi artıracağız.
I'm now joined from Istanbul by Matthew Bryser, who's a former US diplomat, and from Florida by Bülent Yavuz, who's a political analyst. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today here on The Edge. So the much-awaited meetings of the last few days have been held, the G7, the European Leaders, Union Leaders meeting, the NATO summit, and most importantly, the meeting between the two presidents, President Erdogan and President Biden. Matthew, let me come to you first. Let's talk about the meetings between Biden and Erdogan. The very little was said immediately after the meetings by either one of them, but what is your reaction to what they did say?
Yeah, well, first of all, what they showed even, I mean, I haven't seen President Erdogan smile with that degree of warmth that was just shown in your clip in years. And so that shows that their chemistry really connected. So what was said that was really important is not so much what, well, sort of what President Biden said. I mean, underscoring how important Turkey is as a core NATO ally and combating terrorism. But really what President Erdogan said, I think, is the most significant in that he said, you know, there's no problem between the U.S. and Turkey that can't be resolved. And he said he really feels a sense of trust and of a mutual desire to get relations back on track. And also, I think it's very important that he said there's going to be a direct channel of communications between them. So let me unpack that. The last point, President Trump called President Erdogan more often than any other foreign leader. And so if I were President Erdogan, I would have been worried at the beginning of the Biden administration that I might be losing that special link to the U.S. president. But no. As President Erdogan said, that direct link to President Biden will continue. That's quite significant because personal chemistry, in my experience, planning a lot of these, I worked 4 years at the White House, planning a lot of presidential trips. All the plans of the bureaucracies can go off the rails if the presidents don't have personal chemistry. Or on the other hand, all of the entrenched positions of the bureaucracies that are blocking or obstructing cooperation can be cast aside if the two leaders do have personal chemistry, and they clearly do. So that's a really important point, the direct communications. And then the fact that he was saying that, all problems can be resolved and there's genuine trust between us. Now, President Erdogan understands, I'm sure, the difficulties on the U.S. side, let's say on the S-400 issue, given the law passed by the Congress demanding or insisting that the president can only lift sanctions on Turkey if the S-400s leave Turkey. Now, that's politically unacceptable for Turkey. So my guess is that what President Erdogan is saying is President Biden was listening to me and may be willing to go back to the U.S. Congress if we can build some positive momentum in our relationship and ask for a change in that law. So those are very significant statements.
So a good start. And of course, although this was the first face-to-face meeting of Biden's presidency and the first meeting with any world leaders for a couple of years almost, the dynamics changed with the fist bumps or the elbow taps rather than anything else. But Bülent, what was your take from yesterday's meeting?
Well, before the meeting, of course, there were a lot of concerns that the meeting is going to get things even worse than what it is. As we all know, the relations between the two countries have been in a downward spiral for quite some time, with all the issues from both sides. And the other thing is that the priority of one country is not the same as the other one. That also made it even a more difficult situation. But I think I see that I'm pleasantly surprised that the chemistry and the tone after the meeting, and even before the meeting, hinted us that there is going to be a continuous discussion and collaboration between the two very important NATO allies in this very critical junction in history. As you know, it's very, very important that Turkey is seen by the United States as a key ally, as a trusted ally, going forward in this long marathon of issues that we're going to see in this next decade, whether that's issues against China, Russia, climate change, and health issues like this pandemic issues, etc. So the notion that I've seen and many people saw in the beginning of the Biden administration is that the administration classified the allies into, let's say, two groups, the groups of countries where there's like a, let's say, an A team, where the understanding of democracy and the rule of law that they share and they feel comfortable to share, and there are those that are called, let's say, partners more than allies. And Turkey was seen in the second group after all these frustrating events that has happened in the last, few years. Maybe with this meeting, as an aftermath, we're going to see a path forward to bring back again the alliance in the way that it should be. That, the words that spoken during the early days of Obama administration and during the Clinton times, President Clinton times, maybe it's going to come back, but there's a lot to happen for that to happen, because one of the issues, I don't know if Mr. Beerza will agree with me or not, but one of the things that I see is troubling in the U.S. side is that maybe there is a reluctance of understanding the way in which Turkey has changed in the last decade or so, as it became more, more powerful voice in its sphere of influence, and also in the all the way from a geography from the Western China to the Adriatic Sea, and Turkey is becoming more self-sufficient in its self-defense in the defense industry. So those are the two troubling events, maybe confusing or troubling many of the bureaucrats and folks, politicians that are accustomed to the Turkey that they're used to. Maybe it's a part of a struggle. That's what's happening. in Washington. I mean, that's a feeling that I have, and as Americans look into how we can handle Turkey going forward, maybe it's becoming clearer that you can look at these issues as a disadvantage for the U.S., or you can look at it as a tremendous advantage for the U.S. under the NATO partnership. I think President Biden probably would like to see that the second round. But having said that, I'm sure that the U.S. would like to see significant improvements from the way that Turkey governs its country. So that's another issue that we might see as some interesting development going forward along the rule of law and democracy.
Let's throw that one back to Matthew. Now, as we know, Joe Biden has a long history with foreign relations, and he knows Turkey very well. There were some question marks over remarks that he'd made previously about domestic politics. But as you intimated, a meeting like yesterday isn't just about the two people. It's about the people that are working behind them, the diplomats, the aides, all the preparations that go on. Now, if the perceptions in Congress or somewhere else are based on a 1980s Turkey, then they've totally misunderstood what Turkey is today. If it's on a 2000 Turkey, it's still misunderstanding what Turkey is today. Even 2010 things have changed considerably, and Turkey's position in the region has totally strengthened. So is, as Bülent suggests, this a key issue, that properly understanding Turkey is something that America, as well as other countries around the world, need to move forward in their thinking when they're discussing relations with this country?
No, absolutely. I totally agree with Bülent. And, as somebody who lives in Turkey, I'm married to a Turk. My daughter is dual U.S.-Turkish citizen. I worked on Turkey at the White House and the State Department for a long, long time. I mean, if I try to make the case, as Mr. Yavuz just did in Washington, I'm completely discounted, except for among the experts on Turkey at the State Department and Pentagon. I'm discounted as somehow being a lobbyist or being subjective. So yeah, Turkey has a gigantic public image problem still to work through, and it's the brand of the Turkish government outside now of President Biden and those experts I talked about is still toxic in Washington. I mean, and in New York. 2 days ago in Bloomberg, there was an editorial that was absurd. It's as if it was written by a lobbyist for anti-Turkish groups that was arguing that Turkey should be kicked out of NATO. But that was by the editorial board of Bloomberg. So there's a deep lack of understanding of what has happened in Turkey, what is happening, how valuable of an ally Turkey is, not only with NATO's second largest military, not only with its totally innovative drone technologies and tactics, and its support for Ukraine, which is really important to President Biden, supporting Ukraine, not only the geopolitical heft and reach of Turkey, as Bülent was talking about, but also that Turkey is well, as I said, NATO's second largest military, and it is a core member of NATO with one of the most significant and complex geographies in all of NATO. So that's one big set of points. Shorter points, connected to that, I think until now, President Biden was still more or less in campaign mode. He hadn't on Turkey. During the campaign, he had to play to the Greek-American diaspora, the Armenian-American diaspora. And so he made those strange comments at the end of 2019 about how he believed that, or hoped that President Erdogan would be removed, granted by democratic means, but would be removed from office. That's totally inappropriate for a U.S. presidential candidate or a U.S. president. Now, the weight of responsibility is on his shoulders. Now he can't afford to be politically simplistic. Now he has to think about what matters most for the transatlantic community and for the U.S., and that is, of course, restoring the strategic partnership. Very last quick point. In my own experience, what really matters is that a good presidential meeting now has to be pushed into the bureaucracy and followed up, and there have to be working groups. That was my experience after a great meeting between President then George W. Bush and President Erdogan in 2007, I think it was. We were at loggerheads about fighting the PKK. The two presidents had a fantastic meeting. Well, then Prime Minister Erdogan, sorry. And then President Bush turned to a bunch of us and said, now go over to that office. You guys sit down with your Turkish counterparts and work it out. And we did. So that's what I hope President Biden will do now, order the bureaucracy to respond.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the Ukraine as an important issue at this moment, but also one of the cards that was put on the table by Erdogan yesterday, both with President Biden and also in the NATO meeting, was the issue of Afghanistan. Where do you see that going in the next few days, Matthew?
Well, that's clearly an issue that the Biden administration has decided or has recognized as one on which Turkey can play a really important role. I mean, like a substantive role, right? Protecting the Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul as U.S. troops leave. Without that sort of protection, oh my gosh, I mean, things will really unravel quickly in Afghanistan. But beyond that, I think the Biden administration has decided, hey, we needed an issue where we unambiguously have shared interests with Turkey. Let's build on this one. So in the next few days, I mean, I don't think much is going to change in the next few days. I think, you know, there needs to be the support that Turkey has asked for, explicit political support for Turkey playing that role in Kabul, as well as logistical and financial support. So my guess is that in the next few days, the U.S. bureaucracy will start planning how to provide that support that Turkey asks for to remain in that role at Karzai Airport in Kabul.
Well, Matthew, I know you're very busy, so thank you so much for joining us today here on The Edge. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Bülent, so the meeting uncovered lots of issues, but of course we've yet to see substantive details of what's going to come out. So the issues surrounding Afghanistan, surrounding Ukraine, and so forth are very important. But one of the big questions remains about the F-35 and the S-400s. Do you think this was, and of course NATO as well in their meeting will have had something to say about those. Do you think these issues are moving along slowly, that Turkey's perspective will be listened to as Erdogan has asked for discussions, deliberations to resolve the problem? Is it time for diplomacy to sort those out?
Well, there are two sentences I recall from President Erdogan and one from President Biden that I would like to try to recite over here during their mutual press conferences. From President Erdogan's side, he was very clear that there is no issue that is on the table that cannot be resolved. So we know what the issues are. S-400, F-35s are among them at the very high, so that must include those. The second, I recall his last sentence when he was terminating the press conference, that by the time he meant probably end of September, October, by the time of the UN meeting in New York, we will have done our complete hugging, something to that effect. It's a direct translation from Turkish. In other words, the relationship is on a good path, and by that time we will have accomplished so many issues. And by the time that I meet with President Biden again, it's going to be in a situation where some of the issues, most of the issues that we're talking about will be behind us. That's my interpretation. And I recall President Biden is saying a couple of things. One is it says, proof of the pudding is eating. And also it says, first verify and trust. That's how I work. Actually, someone who's been following President Biden, the last 40 years while he was started as a politician and until today, that's his style. We know, we are very familiar with that sort of style. He's very practical, and he definitely builds bonds, and he's one of the most trusted politicians in Congress, always have been. from both parties. He has done tremendous contributions, especially in the crisis in Bosnia. I recall those days. But at the same time, he used on the principle of verify and trust. And I'm sure he's going to be looking at President Erdogan, and President Erdogan is going to look at President Biden the same way on what they have agreed, whether they're going to be implemented in the next few months. And if anyone can do this, I guess you're talking at the you're looking at the two individuals who can make it happen and can lead their teams, direct their teams to go and make it happen in many of the issues that are on the table. So I am one of those, obviously, looking at very optimistic going forward to mend the relationship between the two countries, which has been struggling, suffering for too long now.
Well, absolutely agree. Bülent, if you'd stay with us, we're also joined by Gal Luft, who's a security analyst and professor with Ostim Teknik University in Ankara. Gal, thank you for joining us today here on The Edge. Now, just before we continue our conversation, let's take a look at an infographic. Ukraine's during his election campaign, US President Joe Biden promised to restore a relationship with several countries. But what were his promises? This infographic has more. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he wants some specifics on whether his country can join NATO as a fierce battle ensues between Russia and the United States.
Ukraine says it wants more clarity on relations between Russia and the US ahead of the upcoming summit meeting between the two countries' leaders.
Я дуже хочу конкретики для України. Якщо ми говоримо про НАТО і ПДЧ, я би дуже хотів отримати конкретику з приводу так це чи ні. Я розумію, що це не тільки повинна бути позицією, а узгоджена позиція країн Альянсу, тим не менш, ми повинні отримати зрозумілі дати і зрозумілі ймовірність цього.
President Joe Biden has voiced support for Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression, but says it is up to the Ukrainian leader to convince NATO members that their country was ready to join the Atlantic Alliance.
In the meantime, we will do all that we can to put Ukraine in the position to be able to continue to resist Russian physical aggression. And it will not just depend on me whether or not we conclude that Ukraine can become part of NATO. It will depend on the alliance and how they vote.
Russia strongly opposes NATO membership for Ukraine, which would bring the alliance close to Western Russia and due to the geopolitical concerns. President Vladimir Putin said earlier that at least 50% of Ukrainians do not wish to join NATO and become cannon fodder, adding that Russia cannot be indifferent to this.
Там 50 не 50 примерно. Но как минимум 50% жителей Украины не хотят вступления страны в НАТО. И это умные люди. Я говорю без всякой иронии, не потому что другие глупые, а потому что те, кто не хотят, понимают, что они не желают оказаться на линии огня. Они не хотят быть разменной монетой и пушечным мясом.
The main red line for Moscow is Ukraine's aspirations to join NATO. Fearing its bid for the alliance membership, Putin responded to the 2014 ouster of Ukraine's Russia-friendly president by annexing Crimea and throwing Moscow's weight behind a separatist insurgency in the country's eastern industrial heartland, where the 7-year conflict has killed more than 14,000 people.
So I have with me online from Florida in the United States, Bülent Yavuz, who's a political analyst, and also from Ankara in Turkey, security analyst and Professor Gal Luft. Gal, welcome to The Edge. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
I asked Bülent a little earlier, but so let's ask you, what is your take on the discussion between the two presidents, Biden and Erdogan, yesterday?
I think on the personal level, it has been a bit more pleasant than a lot of people had expected. But with regards to the actual deliverables, it is yet to be seen. I think that both parties have really tried to seek at least a reset button, but it is not clear to me that if they were to find this reset button, both would be ready to push the button simultaneously, and for how long this button will remain pushed, because those problems between the two countries are quite, many of them are irresolvable, certainly not in the near term. But I think from the optics and the atmospheric, it was quite a necessary meeting, and also a meeting that opens the door to a lot of progress, particularly on Afghanistan, but also on the reconstruction of the Middle East, particularly Libya, which will have its election coming toward the end of the year, and the country is already ripe for reconstruction, and both Turkey and America, as well as other parties, would be very eager to play a leading role in this.
Now, we mentioned Afghanistan again. This is a very key area as the clock is ticking down to when the U.S. forces leave that territory, and the people still need protection from destabilization, wherever it may come from, most likely from the Taliban side. So that still needs to be kept under control. But in his press conference, he was saying that, so Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan was saying that the United States diplomatic, logistical and financial support is important in the case of a sustained Turkish presence in Afghanistan. And he was also wondering if he could work together with Pakistan and Hungary there. Do you think that the... Bülent, let's throw this to you. Obviously, Turkey has a very strong presence already in Afghanistan. It's shown that it is very capable of what it does there. But do you think that it can get this, this diplomatic, logistical and financial support that Turkey says they need in order to pull this off?
I think these are very reasonable requests, and I would think that the U.S. side and the NATO would agree for the most part to these requests. And Turkey is not only an important NATO member, but also among all the members, one can argue that one that has more trust within the Afghan public at large. I mean, that's fair to say, because there are a lot of cultural and blood links between the Afghan people and Turkish people that goes, back centuries. Mm-hmm. And ever since the formation of the Republic, the people of Afghanistan has always been very friendly and there was a mutual relationship between Turkey and Afghanistan for many years. So there are these intangible issues, intangible facts, which can become absolutely very important during the management of this immense project. So Turkey has a special place and very experienced in Afghanistan, has been there for many years. So I think the request is going to be, for the most part, will be understood and accepted. That's my expectation.
Well, Bülent brings up a very interesting point there, Gal, that Turkey's cultural and historical links with other countries in this region are a tremendous force to be reckoned with, and one of its great strengths. And of course, the catchphrase that we hear all too often is that Turkey is a bridge between the East and the West, in both physical and philosophical sense or cultural sense. This is really very true. So, is it perhaps true to say that that the United States, that the other NATO members, even Europe, really need Turkey at this moment in history to create a bridge into the future?
Yes, absolutely. And if you only take the case of Afghanistan, you'll notice that Turkey today is the gateway to Afghanistan in the sense that it is responsible for the security in the international airport. Turkish Airlines is the main airline that brings people in and out of Afghanistan. So Turkey is taking a lot of risks, even I would say operational risks, and certainly needs to be rewarded for this service that it conducts on behalf of all the other NATO members. Those are tangible assets that Turkey is bringing to the table. For example, if the Taliban were to try to take over the country, the airport would be the most important, most prized asset that they would want to attack. And that could create a situation where Turkish personnel have to engage in actual fighting with Taliban and their proxies. Mm-hmm. So clearly Turkey is playing a very important role here. It provides an essential service, and I don't see any reason why it should not be rewarded, both economically as well as diplomatically.
And this takes us back to a conversation we were having slightly earlier about the perceptions of Turkey and people not fully understanding the role that Turkey plays. Now, that role is also very strong in the fight against terrorism. And one of the interesting things of the past few days is that in his meetings with Biden and with German Chancellor Angela Merkel, as well as the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan gave them a book about Turkey's fight against terrorism, which I believe looked at the fight against Daesh, the fight against the PKK, YPG terror group, as well as the fight against FETÖ. Gül, how important is Turkey's experience in the fight against terrorism to the rest of the world?
Well, it's almost irreplaceable because it's the only, with the exception perhaps of the United States, that has been involved in a lot of military engagements in past decades. But Turkey has been, in terms of hands on the ground, boots on the ground, has been one of the most experienced military of all the members of NATO. So this experience is priceless, it's valuable. You gain it, you embed it into your military doctrine. So certainly there are a lot of lessons to be learned, and this experience is becoming very handy and has been contributing to the security of the Western alliance for many years, except that some people prefer to oversee it and not pay attention. Mm-hmm. But Turkey has been involved in all of these operations and also paid a heavy price. I don't have the exact numbers of how many casualties Turkey suffered in recent years, but these are meaningful numbers.
Absolutely. Now, in terms, part of that fight, Bülent, is the fight against the PKK-YPG, and we know that President Erdogan has been urging for many years for all NATO members, including the United States, maybe especially the United States, to recognise the struggle that Turkey has with them. Do we know if at the NATO meeting that any progress was made on that front?
We don't know what has transpired between the two presidents or between the two teams of the two presidents also. But I mean, this has been a sore issue for some time. United States recognizes PKK as a terrorist organization, and also many of the officials from the U.S. side, many senior officials spoke about the fact that YPG is an offshoot of PKK, and some of these conversations happen on the Senate floor. Yet at the same time, the support for the Syrian Democratic Forces is very transparent, is out there, as part of the U.S. defense budget every year and continues to do so. Is going to be carried again in 2022. So obviously, the United States is not going to walk away from what it started, which is, as the U.S. states, the sole purpose of this alliance is the fight against Daesh in Syria, and they've been successful to eradicate, for the most part, the military forces of Daesh in Syria, except that now they are, squeezed in a smaller pockets, maybe in southern Syria, but yet to be completely wiped out. So the question is, the Turks ask, okay, all right, what's next? Because they also say Turkey sees this group as a potential security threat for the country. That's obvious. Now, going back again, what President Biden said yesterday when he spoke about the alliance, he emphasized the importance. He emphasized the dedication that he personally has to the fifth article. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I mean, if you look at all the NATO members today and ask yourself, okay, who is really subject to some problems, some possibilities of conflict which relates to the fifth article, I mean, Turkey ranks at the top. I mean, of course, there's issues in the Eastern Europe as well, but this is a live, real problem and needs to be resolved or needs to be reshaped into something else, okay? That, the reshape is, I underline, maybe that's what we will see in the future as things develop and progress between Turkey and the United States first, and also with Turkey and NATO and other European countries as well. So it's yesterday's meeting, I think we're going to look back that we would say that was a turning point. That was a historical meeting, for the events that happened in the next 10 years between Turkey and the Western Alliance, especially with the United States. That I'm hopeful, and I have that. I don't want to use the word prediction, but I just feel that this probably is going to have some impact on the diplomacy in the diplomacy in a big way.
Well, let's hope so. I think it's the gut feeling that you're reaching for there. And as Jens Stoltenberg has suggested, there's a new chapter. Let's hope this is the new chapter, the new time for diplomacy to really take its head and for people to listen to each other. And most importantly, as we've been discussing this evening, for people to update their perceptions of Turkey and to move forward to a better, stronger, more peaceful future for everyone. Gal Luft, Bülent Yavuz, thank you so much for joining me here today on The Edge. It's been fascinating speaking with you. Thank you. So, our analysts have provided their insights on the NATO summit and the meeting, particularly with Presidents Recep Tayyip Erdoğan and Joe Biden. Let's have a roundup of what they had to say. For over 70 years, NATO has kept our countries and our people safe by continuously adapting to new security challenges. In a more unpredictable world, no country can address these increasingly complex challenges alone. That's all for this episode of The Edge with me, Andy Boynes. Stay tuned, because we'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth analysis on the top stories and a look beyond the edge.